A first wife has the right to choose her husband's second wife. A straight nose can be more of a status symbol than a car. Dating outside marriage is illegal, yet there's a TV game show built entirely around dating. You won't believe it, but all of this is completely real. Welcome to Iran, the country everyone thinks they know, and almost no one actually understands. Chapter 1. A civilization beneath your feet. Step into Iran, and the first thing that strikes you is not the restrictions or the political tension you've heard about for years. It is the sheer depth of history beneath your feet. You can stand in Naqshi Jahan Square in Isfahan, a plaza stretching nearly 560 meters, flanked by the Shah Mosque with its dome of blue tiles that seem to shift color as the sun moves, and you are looking at architecture that was already centuries old when the United States didn't even exist. This square is larger than Red Square in Moscow, yet most people outside Iran have never heard of it. Then there is Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Empire, founded by Darius the Great around 518 BC. You walk among enormous stone columns and reliefs, showing delegates from across the known world bringing tribute to the Persian king, and you feel the weight of a civilization that once stretched from the Balkans to the Indus Valley. These are living reminders that Iran, historically Persia, was one of the most powerful empires in human history. Yet this ancient heritage coexists with a thoroughly modern society, where Tehran's skyline is marked by the 435-meter Milad Tower, the sixth tallest telecommunications tower in the world, and northern districts with upscale cafes that would not look out of place in Dubai or Istanbul. Celebrations like Yalda Night, where families gather on the longest night of the year to read Hafez poetry and eat pomegranates, bridge the ancient and the modern as if 2,500 years of history are simply part of daily life. If you are visiting as a tourist, Iran is one of the most inexpensive countries you will ever set foot in. A full meal costs around $3 to $4, a mid-range hotel in Tehran runs about $25 a night, and a taxi across the city costs barely $1. For travelers from Europe or North America, the prices almost feel like a mistake. But this affordability masks a far darker reality for the people who live here. The average monthly salary hovers around $100 to $200, and with inflation that has routinely exceeded 40% annually, basic goods have become suffocating for ordinary families. The Iranian rial has lost more than 90% of its value against the dollar over the past decade. People queue for subsidized food, second-hand markets fill with families selling household items to make ends meet, and university-educated professionals work multiple jobs just to cover rent. This is not a natural economic condition, and it did not happen by accident. It is the direct result of decades of geopolitical conflict and international sanctions that have squeezed the country from the outside, while internal mismanagement has eroded it from within, crippling Iran's ability to sell its oil on the global market, severing its banking system from the rest of the world, and making it nearly impossible for businesses to import essential technology and medicine. So you have this extraordinary paradox. A tourist walks through ancient palaces and enjoys a near-luxury experience for pennies, while the people preserving that heritage are fighting a daily economic battle the world never sees. In the end, Iran is a land of staggering contradictions, and each of these facts tells a story the headlines never cover. Let us know in the comments which one surprised you most. But there is something else about Iran that fills its bazaars, perfumes its air, and quietly generates billions in global trade. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments. I'm curious how many countries are watching Iran right now. Chapter 2. carpets, rose water, and a taste of home. That something is the Persian carpet, and Iran is the undisputed global powerhouse of luxury carpets, a title it has held for centuries. Walk into any high-end carpet shop in London, Paris, or Dubai, and the finest pieces almost certainly trace back to cities like Isfahan, Tabriz, Kashan, or Qom, where master weavers still knot each thread by hand using techniques passed down through generations. A single hand-knotted carpet can take months or years to complete, and a top-tier silk piece from Qom can sell for tens of thousands of dollars, with museum-quality pieces fetching well over $100,000 at auction. What makes these carpets extraordinary is not just their visual beauty, but the fact that each one carries a story embedded in its very fibers. Patterns passed down through generations of weavers, natural dyes extracted from roots, pomegranate skins, and cochineal insects, and the mathematical precision required to knot hundreds of threads per square inch entirely by hand in a world where nearly everything is machine-made and disposable. Iran exports hundreds of millions of dollars in carpets every year to collectors who understand these are not floor coverings but heirlooms. Beyond carpets, Iran produces roughly 90% of the world's rose water, distilled from the pink roses around Kashan and used in French perfumes, Turkish sweets, and religious ceremonies across the Muslim world. Woven through all of this is a cultural etiquette, where hospitality is a moral obligation, where refusing a guest is shameful, and offering tea to a stranger is a sacred duty. If carpets and rose water reveal Iran's refined side, its cuisine reveals something far more familiar. Dishes like kale pache, a slow-cooked broth of sheep's head and trotters, traditionally eaten before dawn, and tachin, a saffron rice cake layered with yogurt, eggs, and chicken, with a golden crust that could rival the finest risotto, are rituals tied to specific days and ways of gathering. But for all the richness of its carpets, rose water, and cuisine, there is one thing about modern Iran that catches nearly every visitor off guard. And you'll see it on the streets of northern Tehran, not in shop windows, but on the faces of the people themselves. What do you think about this? If you find this a little crazy, hold on, because the next chapter has an even stranger custom, where a wife personally chooses her husband's second wife. Guess which tribe that belongs to in the comments. Chapter 3: The Nose Job Capital of the World. The first thing you notice is the bandages. Not on one person, everywhere. Young women walking through the boutiques of Valley Osser Street with white surgical tape across their noses, sitting in cafes with fresh splints still attached, scrolling their phones as though nothing about this is unusual. For them, it isn't. Iran performs more rhinoplasty procedures per capita than any country on Earth. Estimates suggest several 100,000 nose jobs happen every year, and the industry has grown so large that surgeons have become minor celebrities, with waiting lists stretching months and clinics lining Tehran's wealthier districts the way coffee shops line any other city. But what truly catches visitors off guard is not the volume, it's the attitude. In most of the world, cosmetic surgery is hidden. In Iran, it's the opposite. Women keep surgical tape on longer than medically necessary, walking through malls with noses still bandaged well after recovery, treating the splint less like a medical device and more like a fashion accessory. It is closer to a status symbol, a visible signal that you had the means to refine your appearance, displayed without apology. The reason lies, like so many things in Iran, in the country's laws. Since the 1979 revolution, women in public have been required to wear the hijab, covering their hair and much of their bodies. When half of your appearance is concealed by law, what remains visible, the face, carries disproportionate weight. The eyes, the cheekbones, the nose become the primary canvas for identity and self-expression. It's no coincidence that a country with mandatory hair covering became the world's capital of nose surgery. Iranian surgeons have perfected their craft to a level rivaling clinics in Beverly Hills or Seoul, often at a fraction of the cost, as low as $1,000 to $2,000 compared to $10,000 or more in the US. In short, Iran's rhinoplasty culture isn't a contradiction of its conservative laws, but a direct consequence of them. A striking example of how people channel expression into whatever space the rules leave open. But Iran's story isn't written on its faces alone. It's carved into its land, a land so vast and rich in resources that it has drawn the attention of empires and superpowers for centuries. Chapter 4: A Land Too Rich to Be Left Alone. Iran is enormous, far larger than most people realize. Covering over 1.6 million square kilometers, it is larger than France, Spain, Germany, and the UK combined, stretching from the Caspian Sea in the north to the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman in the south. Drive from Tabriz to the port of Chabahar and you'd pass through dense forests, snow-capped mountains, vast salt deserts, and tropical coastlines, all within one country. The Zagros Mountains slice diagonally across the west like a spine, while the Alborz Range hugs the Caspian Sea, separating the lush north from the arid central plateau. Much of the center is dominated by the Dashti Kavir and Dashti Lut, two of the hottest, driest places on Earth, which have also served as natural fortresses for centuries. The population of roughly 88 million spans a mosaic of ethnic groups: Persians, Azeris, Kurds, Lurs, Baluchis, Arabs, and Turkmen, bound together under one national identity for millennia. Not just a land of ancient empires and poetic gardens, Iran is a country whose geography alone has made it impossible to ignore. But it's what lies beneath this land that has shaped Iran's modern fate. Iran sits on some of the largest proven oil and natural gas reserves on the planet, over 150 billion barrels of oil and more than 30 trillion cubic meters of gas, ranking among the top 4 holders of both resources worldwide. These are not abstract numbers. They are the reason Iran has never been left alone. When British prospectors struck oil in Masjed Suleiman in 1908, Iran transformed overnight into a prize every major empire wanted to control, and the decades since read like a timeline of foreign intervention. The Anglo-Soviet invasion in World War II, the CIA-backed coup that overthrew Prime Minister Mossadegh in 1953 after he moved to nationalize Iran's oil, the devastating Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, and the web of international sanctions tightening ever since. Even today, Iran's oil and gas remain the focal point of tensions with the United States, the EU, and regional powers, as sanctions choke the economy and limit the country's ability to sell its most valuable resource. In short, the same wealth that could have made Iran one of the most prosperous nations on Earth has instead made it one of the most contested, and this constant pressure has shaped every aspect of daily life for its people, especially its women, who carry a struggle that is not just political or economic, but deeply personal. Chapter 5: The Women Who Refuse to Disappear. Walk through the streets of Tehran, Isfahan, or Shiraz, and one of the first things you'll notice is the way Iranian women carry themselves. Not with the defeated posture the world imagines, but with a quiet, deliberate defiance woven into everyday life. By law, every woman must wear the hijab in public, and this is not a suggestion but a legal requirement enforced with a rigor that has only tightened over the years, with morality police patrolling the streets, surveillance cameras monitoring compliance, and penalties ranging from fines to imprisonment for those who resist. Yet what's truly remarkable is not the severity of the law, but the creativity of the response. Iranian women push their headscarves back as far as they dare, letting strands of hair escape in a practice the regime calls bad hijab, but which has become practically the default in major cities. They layer fashionable coats over tailored clothing, wear bold makeup, and choose bright scarves that turn a symbol of religious obedience into a canvas of personal expression. The hijab is not just a garment, but a daily battleground, fought not with slogans, but with fabric, color, and the precise angle a scarf rests on a woman's head. But beneath this visible struggle lies a reality that catches almost every outsider off guard. Iranian women are not merely enduring these restrictions, they are dominating the spaces that shape the country's future. Over 60% of university students in Iran are female, one of the highest rates in the world, almost incomprehensible in a nation where a woman's legal testimony is worth half that of a man's, where inheritance laws favor sons, and where a husband can legally restrict his wife from traveling abroad. Walk through the campuses of the University of Tehran or Sharif University of Technology, and you'll find lecture halls filled predominantly with young women studying engineering, medicine, law, and theoretical physics, disciplines that even in many Western nations still struggle with gender balance. They are there because Iranian families, regardless of political or religious conviction, have long treated education as the surest path to stability and dignity. These women argue, challenge professors, publish research, and graduate at rates that consistently outpace men, building a generation that then collides head-on with an economy and legal system never designed to accommodate them. This educational dominance has spilled into Iran's tech sector, where women build startups in e-commerce, fintech, and AI from offices in Tehran, despite formal barriers that still keep most corporate leadership seats out of reach. One observation that strikes visitors immediately is the sheer confidence of these young women in academic and professional settings. They argue, they challenge, they publish, and they build, quietly assembling a generation of highly educated women who then collide head-on with a system never designed to accommodate them. And then there's an institution almost no outsider talks about, but that quietly shapes countless private lives: temporary marriage. Known as Sigheh, it's a legally recognized contract under Islamic law allowing a man and woman to marry for a predetermined length of time, from a few hours to several years, with terms negotiated before signing. To a Western observer, it can sound strange, and it's true that Sigheh has been exploited by men seeking religious cover for relationships otherwise condemned under Iran's strict moral codes. But among educated, urban women, it's increasingly used on their own terms, a pragmatic framework for intimacy outside rigid permanent marriage, whether due to financial limits, family obligations, or simply a desire for companionship without lifelong legal entanglement. Some women negotiate conditions permanent marriage would never allow: duration, financial support, even whether the union is disclosed to family. In a society where an unmarried woman faces relentless pressure, Sigheh occupies a gray area where women carve out agency within a system built to limit it. Overall, the story of Iranian women is not the simple tale of oppression and resistance the world expects. It's something far more layered, a life lived in constant friction between what the law demands and what women quietly refuse to surrender. visible not just in classrooms, but in the very streets of Iran's cities, which look nothing like the barren desert wasteland most outsiders picture. Chapter 6: The City That Breaks the Desert Myth. Expecting dust, donkeys, and crumbling roads, the disorientation begins the moment you step into the city's metro. The Tehran Metro is one of the cleanest, most efficient transit networks in the Middle East. Sleek, punctual, carrying millions of passengers daily across more than 200 kilometers of track, connecting nearly every corner of this metropolis of close to 9 million with a reliability that would embarrass half the transit systems in Western Europe. Women occupy their own designated cars, not because they're forced to, but because the option exists alongside mixed cars, a quiet compromise between religious law and practical urban life, rarely shown in Western portrayals. Above ground, the city pulses with internet infrastructure that, despite heavy censorship, remains surprisingly fast. Young Tehranis stream and communicate with a digital fluency that would feel familiar in Istanbul or Berlin. This is not a country frozen in time, but one where glass towers rise beside centuries-old mosques, where ride-hailing apps like Snap function as seamlessly as Uber, and where a generation that has never known life before the internet navigates its restrictions with real ingenuity. Step out of the metro at any central station, and within minutes you're swallowed by one of Tehran's grand bazaars, a labyrinth of covered passages thick with saffron and cardamom, where merchants have traded in the same spots for generations. The Grand Bazaar of Tehran stretches for kilometers, a city within a city, where you can buy anything from hand-woven textiles and hammered copper pots to the latest mobile phones and imported electronics, the old economy and the new sitting shoulder to shoulder in stalls that have barely changed their shape in centuries. What strikes almost every first-time visitor is how naturally these two Irans coexist. The merchant quoting a price in rials while checking the exchange rate on his smartphone, a young woman in a chador bargaining for spices while her friend films it for Instagram. The bazaar isn't a relic for tourists, but a living commercial heart still moving billions of dollars a year. Overall, what shatters the desert stereotype most is the sheer visual impossibility of the place. Snow-capped mountains framing a modern skyline, tree-lined boulevards that wouldn't look out of place in Europe, a city that functions at a pace contradicting every image shown on the news. And yet, as modern as Tehran feels, the deeper you travel beyond the capital, into the mountains, valleys, and remote plateaus where paved roads dissolve into dirt tracks, you begin to encounter a way of life that predates every empire, every border, and every law this country has ever written. Chapter 7: The Wife Who Chooses Her Husband's Second Wife. Among the most striking of these encounters is the Qashqai, a confederation of nomadic pastoralists who have crossed the Zagros Mountains with their flocks for centuries, moving between summer highlands and winter lowlands along routes their ancestors carved long before the modern nation-state ever touched this soil. Cross their path and you'll find people living in black tents woven from goat hair, cooking bread on convex metal plates pressed into open flames, and measuring wealth not in currency but in the size and health of their herds. A scene that feels less like a living museum and more like a direct window into a continuity of human existence that most of the world has long since paved over and forgotten. Turkic in origin, their identity shaped not by borders but by migration and the rhythm of the seasons. Modern pressures and resettlement programs have pushed many into fixed housing, yet those who remain speak of the mountains as though they were relatives rather than landscape. What sets the Qashqai apart, even from other nomadic groups, is a set of social customs so distinct from mainstream Iranian life that they can feel like a separate country altogether. And perhaps none is more surprising than the practice by which a man's first wife selects his second wife. When a Qashqai household needs additional labor, or when the first wife feels overwhelmed managing the tent, the children, and daily migratory life, it is she, not he, who identifies a suitable second wife, often a younger woman from an allied clan, and she who initiates and negotiates the arrangement. This isn't a system built around male desire but female pragmatism, around the practical realities of survival in an environment where cooperation between women isn't optional but essential, and where hierarchy between co-wives is established from the start by the simple fact that the first wife chose the second, and therefore holds authority within the household. The dynamic that emerges is one of managed cooperation rather than rivalry. The senior wife sets the rhythm of the household, delegates labor, and commands a respect that isn't demanded but simply understood, the family functioning not as a burden imposed on women, but as a system they designed and control. This capacity isn't unique to the Qashqai. It's the single most defining trait of the entire country, persisting despite political isolation and economic struggles that have hollowed out the middle class and made daily survival an act of endurance. What endures above everything is Persian hospitality. Not the hospitality of hotel lobbies, but something older and far more stubborn. Iranians call it ta'aruf, though the word barely scratches the surface. Ta'aruf is the visible ritual, the host who refuses to let you pay, the insistence that you take the best seat, the offer of everything you admire as if it were already yours. Beneath the ritual lies a conviction so embedded that most Iranians wouldn't think to explain it, that a guest is sacred, that to feed a stranger is to honor God, and that turning someone away from your door is a failure bordering on the spiritual. If you're ever invited into an Iranian home, you won't simply be welcomed, you'll be claimed. You'll be seated, fed, and looked after with an intensity that might unsettle you if you're not prepared for it. Your host will place the best food in front of you, pour your tea before you can ask for it, and apologize, genuinely, sincerely apologize, that the meal isn't better. And here's the part that stays with you long after you've left. It doesn't matter if that host has been financially devastated by sanctions, if their savings evaporated in currency collapses they had no role in causing, or if they haven't traveled freely outside their own country in years. What matters in that moment is that you, the guest, feel cared for. The political dissolves inside an Iranian home, replaced by a warmth so disarming you begin to question everything you thought you knew about this country. In the end, if you came here expecting a nation defined by its conflicts, its strict laws, the fears that fill its headlines, you'll find something else entirely. A country whose people have been given every reason to close their doors and their hearts, and who have chosen, generation after generation, to keep them open. That is the real Iran, not the Iran of sanctions and satellite imagery, but the Iran where the first question you're ever asked is never about politics, it's whether you have eaten yet.